Welcome back to Share Your Chef. This is Richard Oring. We got our dough, if you want to call it dough. It almost looks like pancake batter you left on the counter for about an hour or so. Take the plastic off. This is an opportunity for you. Smell it. If it's gonna remind you of going to the bakery when they first pull out the breads in the morning. Oh my God, it smells so good. All right, so it's not like the dough you're used to, that firm, like I always say, like the baby's butt. It's different, it's mushy, it's gooey, it's gonna stick on your fingers. So I'm gonna share two of my favorite tools in the kitchen. One is a bowl scraper. The second one is a bench scraper. Or it's called a dough cutter. You know, when you have your dough and you're cutting it. The other good thing about it is I don't care what you're cooking. It could be dinner, breakfast. It's also great to clean the countertops. So if you don't have these, you can pick them up on Amazon. They're really cheap. Like I said, this is really sticky. So the one way you can combat the stickiness of the dough is with flour, or some people use baker's oil or baker spray. I'm going to use flour. We'll use a little term we used in culinary school. Sourdough means to sprinkle flour in French. I'm gonna put some flour on my bowl scraper, and all I'm doing is scraping it right out of the bowl. It's a blob. It's like the glob, if you remember the movie. All right, got rid of that. Gonna saute or put flour on top of the dough, a lot of it, because it's gonna be moist. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just doing what we call degassing, pushing it down, squishing all that gas out. Then I'm gonna take my bench scraper, kind of fold it up like this, like a little burrito. Normally what I would do at this point is I would wrap it in plastic wrap for about 15 minutes to let it rest. Resting allows the dough to ease up. You ever like roll out dough and it comes back, springs back? Well, if you start little roll, then let it sit for 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and then roll it, it won't spring back, it's resting. All right, but for this video, I'm not gonna let it rest. I'm gonna actually go ahead and shape it. I'm gonna put it into a proofing basket. I got the rice flour. If you don't have rice flour, don't worry. If you don't have a proofing basket, don't worry. You can use a glass bowl. You can use a little baker spray like this. You can use a little salad oil on a paper towel. You can, whatever you're gonna put it in, just make sure it's not gonna stick. Rice flour is great for bread. It doesn't stick to dough. And it comes off easy. You can actually just brush it right off the dough before you're baking it. So what I'm gonna do is I have a wood wicker basket. It's called for proofing, which we use. And so I'm just sprinkling it with rice flour. Save some of that rice flour right there. All I do is coat it. I'm gonna now shape the dough. Again, use a lot of flour if you need to. I like to. I like to use my bench scraper because it's gonna stick to the bottom. And all I'm doing is shaping it to a circle. So I'm kind of picking it up while folding it down. Everyone has different techniques. There's this, you see them bakeries. This does a little harder to do it that way. Again, a little more flour in my hands. I don't want it to stick. Got a little air pockets coming. It's nice. It smells great. Okay, so once you get it, you're gonna have a seam on the bottom. All right, it's impossible to get that seam out. You see what I'm looking at? I mean, that's when you first started, it was a lot bigger, but as I'm working it, that seam's getting it smaller and smaller and smaller. But I'm not worried that much about it, as long as it's not crazy. Seam side up in the basket. See the shape? Dome. When you flip it, you want the dome side up. So we're gonna put the seam side up in the bowl. So carefully lift it, put it in. I like to use so spray. I'm putting a little of that rice flour back in I saved, because what I'm gonna do next is cover it, and we're gonna let it rise. Proof. Wrapping this and gonna let it rise. The next thing I'm gonna do is I need to preheat my oven. So I'm gonna go do that right now. I'm gonna put it 500 degrees. Okay, now that we got our dough all wrapped up, the next thing we gotta talk about is how we're gonna cook the bread. What are we gonna cook it in? Well, first off, most of us are gonna cook it in an oven, I assume. We have ours preheating at 500 degrees. And the reason why we're gonna cook at such a high temperature is we need to create steam. Steam is actually what gives bread that thick, crusty, crunchy crust we're looking for in these type of breads. So we need the oven hot enough to generate that steam. Where is the moisture gonna come from? Well, it can come from different places. You have choices depending on what equipment you own. I took out this pot. It's a ceramic pot, glazed, and it's actually a potato cooking pot. Trust me, I didn't buy it to bake potatoes. I bought it because I like the shape of it for the type of bread I want this to come out to. I want it kind of like a round. I'm gonna make some scores in it later. But by having this with a lid, it's gonna create steam inside this. So there's moisture in the dough. As the bread starts to heat up, the moisture is gonna turn into steam. It has nowhere else to go but back onto the dough itself to create that crust we're looking for. All the steam we need comes from the beginning parts of baking. The reality is in about 30 minutes, I could take this lid off, 20 minutes, and it won't affect the crust of the bread as much for the thickness. By taking the lid off, I'll actually make a darker color on the crust, but it won't make it thicker or anything like that. All the steam comes from the first couple minutes of baking.
What if you don't have a pot like that?
Good question. What happens if you don't have a pot like this? First off, it doesn't have to be ceramic. A lot of you guys, when you got married, you put on your wedding registry a Dutch oven, which is one of those, Le Croissant or whatever that brand is, cast iron pots with a lid. A lot of people use those for baking, but let's just say you don't have a pot with a lid to do this. There are other ways to do it. You can actually make a steam in your oven. If you have a pizza stone, bake the dough on the pizza stone. Remember, you always want to preheat the pizza stone, so when you turn the oven on, throw the stone in. Then what you want to do is you want to get an oven-proof pan. I usually use, our pans are all metal, the handles are, so I could throw that pan, nothing in it, on the bottom of the oven or on top, depending on how your setup is, and you get a spray bottle filled with water. If you don't have the spray bottle, don't worry about it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to get a pot of water, about 3 to 6 cups of water, and get it hot, get it boiling, or a simmer. When you're ready to, put your dough in the oven when it's ready, and then right before you shut that oven, slide out the drawer, pour the water in that empty pan which has been sitting in there as you've been heating that oven, and you're going to see steam generate. Shut the door and wait maybe about 45 seconds to a minute. Open it, take your spray bottle of water, spray the oven all around. You'll see steam coming up. Do that about 3 or 4 times in the first 5 minutes, and then just forget about it. Just don't worry about the steam anymore. You got the steam you needed in there for the bread, and let the cooking do its job. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna want to take this. I like to use temperature. So everyone has their own way of checking bread, but if you can imagine, this thing's gonna be hot. So for you to take this out of the oven and do it the old-fashioned way, where you take the dough out and click on it to hear that hollow thumping sound, it's not gonna work. So what you could do is you could take a kitchen thermometer. I don't mean a meat thermometer, but a kitchen thermometer. We have one here. I take this out, and I know that this bread is done approximately at 190 to 200 degrees. That's what I'm going to be taking out. About 190 degrees, I'm going to take it out. And then once it's out, I'll let it sit for a minute or two, and I want to get it out of the pot, so be careful. Use your pot holders, flip it, get it on a cooling rack. And the purpose for the cooling rack is, so if you just left it here, it's going to create steam again and make the bottom soft. The cooling rack is going to allow the circulation as the heat comes off the bread, it goes down and away, and you're not gonna make your bread soggy. And then the best part about it, and I'll give you a little tip, it's gonna be so hard not to do. You don't wanna cut the bread when it first comes out of the oven. If you ever do that, what happens is as you slice it, it starts getting compressed. The bread gets compressed as you cut it. You want the bread to cool down probably for at least an hour before slicing it. This way, as you slice it with a serrated knife, the bread will hold its shape and it still be warm. So enjoy. I hope you enjoyed our videos, and keep your eyes out for future ones. I know Rachel and I have been talking about pita bread, bagels, Italian bread, French bread, baguettes, you name it. We're gonna try it. If you have anything you're interested in learning, send us an email at rachoring@gmail.com. rachoring@gmail. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Welcome back. It's been about 90 minutes since I spoke to you last. Our dough has been rising on our counter. As we can see, it's almost cresting over the top of our proofing basket, which is what we're looking for. You can see some of that rice flour. See how easy it comes right off? What I've done was I actually roughly cut out some parchment paper to cover the bowl. Again, because I don't want to use my hands to try to get it into that pot, which is at 500 degrees right now in the oven. So what I do is I put the parchment paper right over it, cut it around like roughly, fold it over a little bit, and then I'm gonna flip it. I don't want to be rough on this dough right now because I don't want it to deflate. And proof. Did not stick because of that rice flour. And we can see I could just brush it right off. Or I can bake it with it on, not a big deal. What I do now is I usually take a little bit of flour to dry out the top a little bit. And just rub it in a little bit, like so.
Why do you dry the top out?
Because the next step is the cutting part. I have a special tool. If you don't have it, this is just a razor blade on a handle. If you don't have one, you can always use a serrated knife. I'm gonna score the bread, the dough. As so. I also like to mist it with the water. And I don't know if you can see, I should have showed you that before cutting it, but you can actually see the moisture in that dough even before I sprayed it on the cuts. Taking that hot pot, hopefully your counter can handle it. If not, I would do it in the oven. Picking it up. Help me on the two sides. As you can see. Parchment paper allows me to move it around a little bit. In the oven.
With the lid on or off?
Lid on. I'm gonna set it for 25 minutes. So I like to take it out when the dough is about 210 degrees. I use a food thermometer, just like so. Reason why you want to use a thermometer, one, it's more accurate than the old-fashioned way of taking it out and thumping it on the bottom, hear that hollow sound. Plus, I don't think you really want to try to get that bread out and then have to put it back in. It's going to be piping hot. When the bread's done, we're going to take it out of the oven. We're going to put it on a cooling rack so we can have that heat dissipate and not go back onto the bread to cause it to be soggy bottom. Hopefully you enjoy it. Next time you see me, you're going to see the bread coming out of the oven. Hot, and we'll talk about when the proper time is to slice it and eat it. Thank you.